1600 hours. It's time for the news on freedom. My name is Mikhail Baranov, and I'll tell you about the important events of the day. Hello! A private house was destroyed as a result of a Russian drone strike on Mykolaiv. A fire broke out. The blast wave damaged the roofs of a dozen neighboring houses, and windows were blown out in 20 more, according to the city administration. Preliminary reports indicate there were no casualties. Specialists are documenting the damage on site, and utility services are helping to deal with the aftermath of this attack. The Russian army attacked a residential neighborhood in Zaporizhzhia with strike drones. One person was killed and 7 others were injured, including 3 children. The explosion shattered windows and destroyed balconies in 3 9-story apartment buildings and damaged several cars. A report shows how the city is dealing with the aftermath of the Russian strike.
The nighttime strike by a Russian drone on Zaporizhzhia was caught on one of the surveillance cameras. The drone crashed and exploded just a few meters from the apartment buildings. In the nearby buildings, the blast wave blew out windows and tore off balconies.
We were actually on that side in the bedroom where we were lying down watching TV. And somehow the balcony got blown off and the backdraft turned the loggia inside out. The balcony was finished off, there's no balcony left, and the loggia was turned outward. But at least the windows are still intact, thank God.
Locals say that for the past month, drones have been flying over the houses almost every day. That's why people have gotten pretty good at recognizing the sound of an approaching threat.
You could really hear it coming. It was so loud. It whistled right over our house, you know? And then boom! But nothing happened to us, just the thermometer got knocked off.
According to city officials, more than 100 apartments were damaged in the attack. Right after the strike, utility workers and emergency crews started repair work. They're putting up wooden boards in place of broken windows and restoring utilities.
98% of the windows have been covered. The remaining 2% belong to people who are just now coming back. They weren't here last night when it happened. The windows have been boarded up with wooden panels. Heating's at 100%, electricity's at 100%, and water supply's at 100%. At the exact location where the roadway was struck, urgent emergency repair efforts are currently well underway.
As a result of the Russian attack, a woman was killed and 6 more people were injured. Among them, 2 children needed medical attention. Ole Pritikin and Boris Yakovenko reporting from Zaporizhzhia for Freedom TV channel.
Due to Russian shelling of the energy infrastructure, there are new power outages in several regions of Ukraine. This was reported by Ukrainian. In particular, a significant number of consumers in Odessa region remain without electricity. There are also outages for customers in Zaporizhzhia, Pokrovsk, and Sumy regions. Everywhere the security situation allows, emergency repair and restoration work is underway. Overnight, the Russians launched a total of 127 weapons at Ukraine, including a ballistic missile and more than 100 drones. According to the Air Force Command of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Ukrainian air defense managed to neutralize 100 drones. The Russian attack was repelled by aviation, anti-aircraft missile troops, electronic warfare, and drone units, as well as mobile fire groups of Ukraine's defense forces. 160 combat clashes were recorded on the front line over the past day. This was reported by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The most intense fighting is in the Huliaipole direction. There, Ukrainian defenders repelled 31 Russian assaults. There were 21 combat clashes on the Pokrovsk section of the front. The Russian army also attacked 14 times near Kostiantinivka and 10 times in the Slavyansk direction. Ukraine's defense forces cleared the eastern part of the village of Hryshyne of Russian occupiers. This is in Donetsk region. This was reported by the fighters of the 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Ukrainian Air Assault Forces. They also shared footage of drones targeting Russian positions. Russian troops continue to put pressure on the village, which is located northwest of Pokrovsk. Units of the aggressor country's army are using several routes of movement, operating in small assault groups, but Ukrainian defenders are successfully detecting and eliminating them. Russia's total combat losses since the start of the full-scale invasion have already exceeded 1,256,000 troops. In the past 24 hours alone, 740 Russian occupiers were eliminated. This was also reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In addition, the day before, defense forces destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 40 artillery systems, air defense assets, and nearly 200 units of enemy automotive equipment. And now to other important news. Ukraine has imposed personal sanctions against Alexander Lukashenko. This was announced by President Volodymyr Zelensky. Last year, the Russian army deployed a system of relay stations in Belarus to control strike drones. This intensified attacks on Ukraine's northern regions. Zelensky also noted that more than 3,000 Belarusian enterprises are working for Russia's needs. They supply equipments and components for missile production. The sanctions include, in particular, asset and capital freezes, a ban on trade operations, and visa restrictions.
Alexander Lukashenko has been trading Belarus's sovereignty for the continuation of his personal power for quite some time now. He helps the Russians circumvent international sanctions for this aggression, actively justifies the Russian war, and now is also increasing his role in escalating and prolonging the war. There will be special consequences for this. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Sweden, Lithuania, and Canada have established a fund to support the restoration of Ukraine's transport infrastructure. The relevant agreement was signed by the parties in Stockholm. This document will allow Ukraine to receive funds from foreign partners for urgent repairs of roads, bridges, and railways destroyed by Russian shelling. This was reported by Alexei Kuleba, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for the Restoration of Ukraine. The main goal of the agreement is to create a fair and transparent system for restoring the transport network. The funds will be provided as non-repayable aid, and the projects will be managed by Ukraine's Ministry for Communities and Territories Development. In addition to the main participants, Germany, the United Kingdom, and other European countries have also promised to support the fund. NATO troops will conduct a landing on the Baltic Sea coast in Germany as part of military mobility exercises. According to the alliance, the maneuvers involve 15 ships and more than 2,500 soldiers. Personnel, weapons, and equipment will be brought ashore after a sea crossing through the Putlos training area. These maneuvers are considered the largest NATO exercises this year. Estonia may deploy nuclear weapons from its partners on its territory if NATO deems such a step necessary. This was stated by Estonia's Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna, who also noted that Europe should not reject the alliance's supranational nuclear deterrence.
We are not opposed to the deployment of nuclear weapons on our territory. We don't have a doctrine that would rule this out. If NATO deems it necessary, in accordance with our defense plans, to deploy, for example, nuclear weapons on our territory as well. Margus Tsahkna, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, in a piece for Estonian National Broadcasting.
And now we move on to the main topic of the day. The negotiations in Geneva between Ukraine, the US, and Russia have concluded. On the second day, the talks lasted about 2 hours, according to the press secretary of Rustem Umerov. That's significantly less than on the first day, when the delegation spent about 6 hours at the negotiating table. The Ukrainian negotiating team has already informed the president about the initial results of the trilateral meeting. Volodymyr Zelensky called the negotiations difficult. The Ukrainian president also emphasized that all three delegations were constructive on military matters, where there is some progress and understanding. On the other hand, Zelensky noted that when it comes to resolving political issues, including sensitive ones like the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and territories, there has been no such progress.
So far, from what I've heard, the military understands how to monitor a ceasefire and the end of the war if there is political will. Basically, they've agreed on almost everything. The monitoring will definitely involve the American side. I think that's a constructive signal. As for the political aspect, these are all sensitive issues. The East, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We can see that there's some groundwork being laid. For now, the positions are different because the negotiations were not easy. So I heard progress on the military front, and there was dialogue on the political front. They agreed to keep moving forward, agreed to continue. I didn't hear the same kind of progress there as on the military front. But I want to emphasize, my team said they can't report everything over the phone. They want to, but they can't just yet. Once they return, we'll have a better understanding. We'll also be in more contact with our European colleagues. I'm glad there was broader participation this time. For us, Europe's presence is very important. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine.
An Axios journal also reported on social network X that the political group in Geneva failed to make progress the day before. According to him, the talks allegedly reached a deadlock because of the position presented by the new head of the Russian delegation, Vladimir Medinsky. Sources from the publication claim that it was specifically the Russian side's proposals that caused the dialogue to stall. At the same time, the details of Medinsky's statement have not yet been disclosed. Agence France-Presse, citing a source close to the Russian delegation, writes that the negotiations between Ukraine, the US, and Russia took place in a very tense atmosphere. The agency also notes that the meeting in Geneva is an attempt by the American administration, led by Donald Trump, to end the Russian Federation's war against Ukraine. At the same time, the U.S. President's Special Representative, Steve Witkoff, reported significant progress following the negotiations in Geneva between Ukraine, the U.S., and Russia. According to him, on Donald Trump's instructions, the American side acted as the moderator for the third round of trilateral consultations. Witkoff thanked Switzerland for its hospitality and emphasized Trump's efforts to resolve the conflict. He did not provide any details about the agreements reached.
President Trump's success in bringing both sides of this war closer together has led to significant progress, and we are proud to work under his leadership to stop the killing in this terrible war. Both sides agreed to inform their leaders and continue working on the agreement. Steve Witkoff, Special Representative of the U.S. President on social network X.
European countries are also closely following the progress of the trilateral negotiations between Ukraine, the US, and Russia. The meeting in Geneva was one of the topics discussed by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and US President Donald Trump. According to Reuters, citing a Downing Street spokesperson, the leaders held a phone conversation. A possible temporary moratorium on strikes against Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which may have been discussed in Geneva, would primarily benefit Moscow. That's the opinion of analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. In their assessment, Russia would not use the pause for genuine de-escalation, but would instead stockpile missiles and drones for future large-scale attacks, while a halt to Ukraine's strikes on Russian energy infrastructure would weaken Ukraine's position. Analysts note that Moscow has already resorted to the tactic of such short-term ceasefires in the past in order to create the appearance of concessions while simultaneously preparing for the next wave of terror. At the same time, Russia continues to strike Ukrainian logistics and infrastructure even during the pause. Bloomberg reports that Russian strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure are not accidental, but rather part of a strategy aimed at exerting pressure and prolonging the war, not achieving peace. The publication believes that Moscow continues to destroy the energy system in order to buy time and weaken Ukraine, while diplomatic negotiations are used to delay making real concessions. Bloomberg emphasizes that Russia's attacks on energy infrastructure should have real international consequences, including increased sanctions pressure, tougher measures against Russia, and ensuring accountability for attacks on civilian infrastructure.